All right, welcome everyone. I think we're just going to wait a few more minutes and give everyone an opportunity to settle in here this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever it is in the world that you are. And then we're going to get started and looking forward to it. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. This is actually my first time hosting a webinar, so hopefully I get the buttons right and you guys can hear me. First of all, I just wanted to point out we have some great attendance today. I was telling the panelists beforehand, this is actually the most highly registered webinar in IdeaScale's history. So, there's something about this topic that is interesting to everyone, and I don't think we'll let you down today. I'm excited for what is to come. Let's see. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. In a moment here, I'll allow each of the panelists to give a quick introduction of themselves. But today we're here to talk about generative AI and how it can augment human creativity and democratize innovation. And this webinar, I kind of want to keep it, somewhat informal. I'm here with, the panelists as friends and colleagues, and we've had a lot of, meetings over the past year, just kind of talking about this stuff. And I think, let's kind of keep it a little bit talkative, if that's okay. And, make sure that you're able to jump in if there's something you want to say, that's totally okay. And let's make the most out of our time together and what we can share. So first of all, in terms of our introductions, if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to put you on the spot a little bit and actually go around the horn and ask each of you to say a few things kind of about yourself and where you are, and maybe a little bit about your work, and then we'll jump into some of the content. So Lokesh, do you want to go ahead and get us started? I think you're on mute.
Welcome, dear friends across the world. And this is Lokesh Venkataswamy, CEO and Managing Director at InnoMantra. InnoMantra is an young organization driving innovation, digital transformation, and intellectual property. We're based in India, and we collaborate with IdeaScale and many more organizations in delivering innovation services and consulting. So I look forward to hear more from all of you, from the panelists. I'm really excited to be part of this Allied panel.
Go ahead, Tojin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So my name is Tojin Ipin. I am a principal consultant and a co-founder of InnoMantra. I'm also a senior fellow at the conference board. I was formerly a faculty member at the University of Missouri. So there's a slight update from my the title there. So I'm excited to be with my good colleagues and friends and share about a topic which we are extremely passionate about. And based on the turnout, I think it's a topic that I think all of you also seem to share a lot of interest in. So excited to be with you, and thank you again for joining.
Dan?
It's over to me. Hey, everyone. Dan Finkenstad. I'm stationed out of North Carolina. So I live in North Carolina in the U.S. I am a military officer, but can't bring all that into this conversation. But on the side, I do run a consulting firm where primarily I work on things such as defense innovation, supply chain, procurement, and contracting, which I have a background in. And then my connection with the group is Tojan and I were classmates together at Chapel Hill, and been working on a lot of things together, and was really excited that he brought me in on this project with Lokesh and Josh as well. So I'm really excited to be here, and hopefully we can show you some cool stuff.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I just can't emphasize enough how honored I am to have you guys join me, on this webinar today, thinking about kind of the past year and all the conversations and, everything I've learned from you guys too has been incredibly special. And just for everybody on here, these guys are really the experts when it comes to crowdsourced innovation and, now how generative AI can help, elevate that type of work. So we're extremely lucky to have you guys and your time. So thank you in advance. And for those of you wondering, at the end, I actually have a slide where I have everybody's QR code. So if you want to connect with any one of the panelists today, after the webinar, you should be able to use your phone and quickly go to their LinkedIn and contact them there. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get us started for the first 5 minutes or so. Dive into the HBR article, which is sort of, why we're here today, and then hand it over to Dan and Tojan and Lokesh that I think, have some of the more kind of exciting updates. So that begins with a live demonstration, actually. Dan is queued up. Let me take a step back. So we're here today because of this HBR article, which, was a wonderful thing that happened, to us, but it's, a lot of the thoughts that went into this are frankly almost a year old. I think it was December, January of last year where Tojan started to kind of bring us together and share his thoughts with us. And, we were able to kind of contribute in our own ways. And, that turned into this HBR article and ended up being, the cover, featured on the cover actually over the summer. And so while the magazine came out more recently, a lot of the thoughts that went into it, again, were from December and January. So a lot has transpired since then. And in just catching up with Tojan and Dan and Lokesh over the last few months, I just was blown away by where, some of these concepts and actually sort of the applications of that are. And so that's one of the reasons why, said, hey, we got to do a webinar on this as sort of a follow-up, right, to some of the things ideas we were talking about in that article. The other thing I'll mention too is the panelists today come from all different industries, or experience working on innovation in all different industries, which I think is one of the things that makes this topic and kind of the article so special, is it's not just focused on private sector. In fact, there's a lot that goes into that from, government or military or even higher education experience. And it's a topic that can really be applied, to any of those industries. And we bring all of those experiences into not only what you read in the article, but of course, what we'll be sharing with you today. So that's good. That's not always the case, right? Sometimes the focus is on one area and you have to try and adapt, but not the case today. I also wanted to point this out. I think everybody recognizes the quick emergence of ChatGPT as a technology in terms of adoption. And we're actually, I think, coming up on the 1 year mark of its release, which is crazy. So this was within 5 days. Obviously, if you look at where, it was 3-6 months, today, it's just even more so kind of off the scale. But I just show this because, it's a good reminder that this technology is moving quickly in terms of the application of it now, right? So in our world, that means, innovation and how it can kind of support some of those efforts. And so we're here really to help you, right? Take advantage now of this new technology, and now's the time, to figure out how you can use it to overcome some of the challenges that you might be facing. in your innovation efforts. Just to touch on what's in the article real quick to kind of set the stage before I hand it off to Dan. When we were coming together last winter, and kind of, experimenting with ChatGPT and these other, models, and attempting to find ways to incorporate that into our work, I think we kind of all came to this realization of, wow, this could actually help a lot of our clients overcome the challenges that we see them facing when it comes to innovation or creativity or crowdsourcing, in ways that maybe were less possible before. And so the challenges on the right here, I'm sure for many of you, these aren't new challenges. What it is that we do and you do is very difficult. It's not as simple as just turning on the light switch and everything works. I wish it was. And in fact, every one of the panelists here has, spent, a large part of our career in helping our clients overcome these challenges. And, there's no easy answer to that. When you look at how Gen AI could help, at least from the article standpoint of the article, we identified 5 kind of concrete ways that we felt, again, kind of referencing our work and what we were attempting to kind of experiment with, 5 ways that these new tools could help overcome those challenges. The first one was around promoting divergent thinking. And that's really kind of about taking 2 remote concepts and finding ways to combine them to create something novel or new or an idea out of that. An example that came from the article was taking the concept of an elephant and a butterfly and getting some inspiration or some visuals on what that could be. And then furthermore, taking that and creating some product categories around that. And in the article, again, you'll see that within seconds, really, we were able to produce chairs, a line of chairs along that theme, or artisan chocolates. And I won't touch on that too much more because Tojin, in fact, is going to spend some time on that. Things like challenging expertise bias. So this had to do with if you look at the article, it kind of touches on early stage product development and how more traditional forms of that is about creating form based on function, right? And how that can be a limiting factor really in thinking about brand new possibilities. And so the example in the article was starting first with sort of crab inspired children's toys, and again within seconds getting these brand new images, and then going through the exercise of asking ourselves and looking at each one and coming up with maybe what they could be used for, or the form, right, of that, if you will. And so, for example, if you look at the top, not the one on the top left, but the one just next to that with the ball in the crab's hands, one idea could be this toy where it throws the ball, right, or something like that. So, we found this to be so inspiring because it's making things move quicker, get concepts quicker, and again overcoming a lot of the inefficiencies that we saw again in our work and your work when it came to creativity and innovation. So I think from a kind of a getting started standpoint, that should be good enough. And I'm pretty sure I'm over time as well. If you're interested, again, in diving into some of those concepts more fully, I do recommend the article. You can find it on, just Google search it. The other thing that I'll say too is just kind of where I'll open it up to, guys, what I like about the article is it's very concrete, right? In terms of what we're talking about. Anybody can open it up and read it and kind of understand how it can be applied to their work if you're, if you're in this business, which I think, that's not the case with every article, especially in Harvard Business Review. Sometimes it can be a little too kind of pie in the sky, but I think we did a wonderful job. And, obviously, it's helping a lot of people. So that's exciting. All right, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand it off to the more exciting part of today's webinar, which is going through a live demonstration. And for that, I'm going to hand it off to Dan, who has been doing a lot of this recently. And Dan, maybe you want to kind of cue that up a bit and talk about where your work is really right now in this, and then maybe we can go through the demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh. So initially, we were testing all of the large language models out and some of the text to image generators based on the context of the article. And it overlapped nicely with what I taught at a university that I used to teach at, where we worked on innovation projects for the federal government. And it was based off of sort of a problem statement. You had to work on refining that problem statement with stakeholders over time. And then over a couple months, you might generate some minimum viable product concepts from a team of graduate students. And it was really fun. It was very successful. We got to some doable projects, I'd say about 60% of the time. Some of them were more like, got us to where we needed to go to start building a product, right? But we started testing it out with the large language models. And we found that really quickly we could do what would take about a month with students working really hard. We could get there in like 10 minutes, right? And so, because you're thinking about this massive corpus of information, right, that the students normally would have to go gather to come together, but they could start iterating. So I'll show you a demonstration of sort of doing some of that early stage ideation and requirements development, and how you can even get to a very quick product design. That'll be the demo. Other things we've been working on is using generative AI for supply chain risk scenario planning, business continuity planning, writing contracts, evaluating contracts, assessing the readability of things that are written in English and how we can better write them for public-facing communications. So a whole host of issues. I also teach courses in supply chain and enterprise sourcing. So we've even used it, like some of the features in the data analytics side, to teach students things like data cleansing, business intelligence techniques. You can do all of this like right within the GPT platform. So it's pretty interesting. But again, today's demonstration will be more aligned to the article, and we'll start with just sort of a very basic, let's learn how to prompt, let's learn how to get some requirements written out. And with that, I think I can start, Josh, whenever you're ready for me to share screen here. Great. So I will go over, 1 second. Tell me when you're seeing my GPT window here.
Yeah, you're good, Dan.
Okay, yeah. So I don't want any judgments on what I've got going on here in my thread of ideas of things I've been working on, because I've done everything from early stage product ideation to like how to finance my car, right? Like I'm using this thing for everything. So don't read it too much into that. What we'll do, if you're not familiar with GPT, I do want you to note that there's a GPT 3.5, which is the free version, which is what we started out with. And then GPT-4, which has some of these added features like advanced data analysis, where you can put in like data files. There's a host of plugins, which are external apps that you can link to, like if you want to read a PDF or something like that. And then the really cool add-in right now is what they call Vision. We have DALL-E 3, which is the text-to-image generator, which is incorporated within it. So we'll start with GPT-4. And if you're not familiar with prompt engineering, it's a burgeoning field. I don't know how professionalized it's going to get, or how much it's just going to be functional experts really honing their skills in that themselves, or maybe a little bit of both. But even if you're not good at prompt engineering right now, the cool thing is you can actually ask the large language model to help you write the prompt, right? And so that's what we're actually going to do here, which is say like, hey, I'd like you to take on the role of a prompt engineer, because these large language models do like context. So sort of give them their context of what they're working with. For new product concepts. And then I'm asking it, what prompt format would it like for novel product solution ideas for a problem statement? And then I want them to generate a random problem statement. So we're tracking? I can't see the audience, so I'm going to make sure my co-host here agree with what I'm doing. All right, awesome. So we'll run that and see what kind of output we get. Now, I will tell you, I've tested this on GPT 3.5, and it's much more generic. It's not this like nice lined out play-by-play of how they want to develop it, your prompts and your problem statements. So it's nice in 4.0 that it's more consistent, right? So what's really cool is, let's look at what we've got. So we asked it to do this, and it says, hey, for a prompt, what I really need to know when we're talking about this generation of new product design is, what is the problem statement, who's the target audience, what are some of your key constraints, are there desired features or attributes, and any other optional information. So that's the catch-all, right? And then it gives us this example of house plants, right? People often forget to water them, and these urban dwellers. And what's interesting is I don't know why AI likes this one or 4.0 likes this, but it keeps regenerating this idea every time I give it this prompt. So this is something that it wants to build, I think. Now, what I'm going to do to be sure is I think if I go from 4.0 general and ask it for an image, it'll jump to DALL-E 3, but if it doesn't, we'll go right into DALL-E 3. And so what I'm going to ask it to do is can you generate a product design photograph for this concept, right? Okay, so this one's going to say it can't. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this information, right, which is our prompt that we already know we need. We're going to start a new thread, and we're going to go straight into DALL-E 3. And we're going to say, can you generate a photograph, a product design photograph for this concept? And then we're going to give it the concept, right? So I just cut and pasted that information in. And what you're going to see, okay, yep. So it's working on the additional information. Now it's going to generate the actual product design photograph. So what it did was it took all the prompt information that was written out in the initial side of ChatGPT 4, consolidated it into the DALL-E 3 format, and now it's going to feed it to DALL-E 3. And DALL-E 3 is going to ingest that and generate our initial product design concepts. And you can see, like, you've got sort of really quickly, like, what does the product look like, right? So this is HydroGuard. It gets a slightly different device every time I ask it for this. And so now you can start iterating with your teams on, like, do you like this design, right? Is this something that you think would be useful? And now you can start working on, using the prompt format that you've just established with GPT for other concepts and seeing what kind of designs. So for the sake of time, so we don't have to rush through watching me do all of this, I'll go to an earlier version of what we did on this. There we go. And we will look at what was generated, right? So forgive me for flying through so fast to this. Okay. So what we did was we had previously taught GPT or discussed with it in a thread the right type of prompt to give it. And we said, all right, now what we want to do is give it a new problem statement with a new target audience and new key features. So the current problem statement is how to get fresh water to austere areas in the Indo-Pacific region for hikers moving across islands, which is a real problem statement that I've been given in the past. Target audience will be consumers and federal agencies, and key features and requirements would be the ability to generate fresh water, to be lightweight, mobile, low energy use for self-energizing. And then the preferred style is, I want to see this image with a real life sort of image and photograph. So it develops this concept of Aqua Wanderer. And I did not ask it for all of these features. It goes through these and, adds things like high capacity and describes how it'll self-energize, digital display. And then I asked for a design of it. Now, when I get this design, I'm looking at this going, well, my product requirement earlier was for, I actually needed this for more than one person. And this doesn't look like this holds a lot of water or it'll be very useful, right? So then I ask it, say, hey, how would you do this for groups of 3 to 5 people? Well, then it builds this, right? And then I'm like, well, now I've given up my ability for mobility, right? I need it to be lightweight and mobile. So then it says, okay, no problem. We're going to use these inflatable bladders and these sort of collapsible structures, right? And I'm going to go, well, I still don't like that design. That's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of something that they can travel with for like weeks at a time. Can you help me with that? So what we're doing is we're refining the problem statement as we're iterating with the design, right? So it comes up with this, which now we're getting a little closer, right? But I have to tell it things like, okay, you've created this backpack, but if we look at it, it's still a little bit ridiculous in the size. And it's got like images of fish and stuff inside the water tank, which I tell it is like, this isn't sanitary. And so it goes back, and now we're starting to look at a product that looks like something we might actually be able to produce and use in this situation, right? A desalination backpack that you could take throughout these areas with sort of these storage containers where people can refill their bottles on your hiking team, right? Now, this gets at what we discussed in the article, which is what if function follows form? Now we've refined, we started with a function and a problem statement, we got to a product, and we now know, like, okay, this is what right looks like to us. But we want to re-describe that product because it's not really following the initial design. It's got a new design based on this iteration of imagery. So we can ask it to do that, which is say, now regenerate the requirement. And look what it does. Now it gives us the new design for AquaTrek backpack, right? And lays all that out for designing this product, which was not based off of just the initial problem statement or as we iterated, but a combination of iterating on our problem statement definitions along with what right looks like in the imagery space, right? And that's a really, really cool idea, because usually when I see these innovation projects, we're doing MVPs on a whiteboard, 2D. People are like throwing sticky notes and imagining what this might look like. You're not having 3D renderings within 2 minutes and going through this process, right? So this entire process took me, a very short amount of time to get to this product. I'll tell you, like, my graduate students didn't come to anything quite this novel. They went way far on the feasibility side, which is what's already commercially available, which is fine based on some of their requirements, because they are more purchasers of stuff versus designers and developers. But if you're trying to design, develop, and enter a new space with a novel solution, you don't want to be rehashing what everyone else is doing, right? So this is the real beauty in this product design, this ideation, and then going, okay, I can't give the customer and the designer my old requirement statement because that's not how it was visualized. I need a new requirement statement based on this visual, and sort of iterating back and forth. So to me, it's sort of this beautiful dance between, of honing a sculpture of what it is you want in your initial product design. And again, super early in the process, not a lot of time spent on this. Things are getting better and better. When Tojin and I first started messing with this, we were bouncing from GPT to Midjourney and all over. Now they're just all collecting together within GPT, and it's kind of really amazing what you can do in one space. So I think that's pretty much the end of the demo, Josh, unless you've got anything else you'd like me to talk about.
Yeah, I always like, the demo never gets old for me. It's so inspiring. And I mean, you were doing this type of work, but outside of these tools, right? Previous to having access to this. And so I'm just curious, how much time or money would exercises like this require in the past versus now what you can do? And it sounds like you're working with clients now that are actually, this isn't just some fantasy made up thing. Like, this is actually adding value.
Yeah, it is. And there's various levels of who's doing what with that, right? There's this constant tension between, reaching out and grabbing the generalizable knowledge and the massive, imaginary capability of these tools without, leaking your data into some place where other people can access it, right? I think there's a massive misunderstanding in how that actually operates. And it is why you're seeing things right now like, in America, our president just released an expansive executive order on AI, right? That goes into all sorts of controls. Today at Bletchley Park, if anyone knows the significance of Bletchley Park, but right now they're having the AI Safety Summit right now, right, to discuss those same issues for Europe. So, I mean, I think that's sort of what I'm seeing, Josh, is like the barrier to entry to really amazing ideation and innovation has been dropped extremely low. But now everyone's swinging towards all right, now let's make sure this is secure and that we can protect our IP, and that, any really good ideas we have don't become everyone's good idea so that we lose our competitive edge, right? So I think firms are going to have to figure out, and organizations, how much time to spend in this space and when to transfer those good ideas outside of the space, work privately, and come back, right? So they're going to have to come up with their own rules of engagement for that. But I think what I have witnessed is the ability to get to a refined problem statement and a visual imagination of what a solution can look like. That time has been reduced, from weeks to minutes. And I mean, honestly, from weeks to minutes. And so you can calculate the cost of that, and for a really nice model like this, like GPT-4, you're talking $20 a month, right? For the tokens that you put in there. Obviously, if you use it at the enterprise level, who knows what the pricing is? I'm not familiar. You have to call them for that. But definitely, way more affordable than hiring a dozen grad students or professors to sit around and ideate with engineers for 2 months, right? For sure.
Yeah. One quick thought before I hand it over to Tojin. Typically when you look at emerging technologies, they're actually quite inaccessible to the general population, right? So the chart that I showed about adoption, many of those were actually social tools. So I kind of, classify those a bit differently. But when it comes to business tools, like, I don't know, let's say robots, right? Virtual reality, those things can take years before the average consumer can just go online and access, especially at the cost that, these like ChatGPT, as you mentioned, offers today. And I think because of that, it's so game changing. Literally anybody can access, these tools and do exactly what you just showed us, Dan, whereas in the past that was not always possible. And I think too, that's one more reason why, we see clients coming to us asking, hey, how do we use crowdsourcing to kind of quickly bring people up to speed on what these tools are, what they are not, and how we as a company should start using them immediately, because they're so accessible again. And that I think is just so unique.
Yeah, I think two big things, right? There's two barriers that generally have gotten in our way, right? One was barrier to imagination, and the other one was barrier to creativity, right? I think the barrier to creativity was much higher, or was a much larger barrier than imagination. I feel like most people have really strong, or a lot of people I meet have really great ideas, but the ability to visualize that or properly describe it is challenging for them. This helps overcome that. But on the other hand, folks who do have barriers to imagination, they haven't really, thought outside the box a lot, and it doesn't something they spend a lot of time with. Even spending time running through these exercises, if you give it to them in a mechanical way, and then eventually let them go into a sandbox, could even build their capability for imagination, right? So it gets over both barriers, I think. We really discussed the barrier to creativity in our article, but I think it will help some of those. It's easy for us in a biased group of people who sit around imagining things to think like everyone's got great imaginations, but they don't, right? But you can build that, right? It's a muscle you can exercise, and I think this is sort of the treadmill that we can use.
Yeah, hence the title, augmenting, right? Our ability to be creative. I think it totally applies. All right, Tojin, very excited to introduce or have you come on stage next, if you will, our virtual stage here. And Tojin's going to be talking about, I guess, what we're calling kind of the future frontier of this. Tojin, I'm excited to kind of see what you've been thinking about over the last 6 months, and where you see this going potentially. And I guess I'll hand it off to you at this point.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, thank you, Josh and Laura and the IdeaScale team for bringing us this opportunity to speak to all of you. So with me is also my colleague and co-author on the HBR article, Lokesh. So some of these ideas, the four of us, we've been thinking for quite some time, but also we've been thinking about how we can extend the ideas and make it useful. So I want to briefly talk about something we alluded to in the article, but we were not able to flesh out in detail. But I think it's a powerful technique that I feel that the more I see it and try it out, it's very exciting, and it sort of ties in with what the theme of our article, which is how AI is not just about spitting out ideas that you can directly use, but rather a cooperative process where human beings who are creative, right, can work with these tools to do something better than what they were able to do in the past. So if you've seen what Dan did, it wasn't a case of just asking it to generate ideas. It was a very interactive process. So there's a fear that with generative AI, there's no room for human creativity. I think it's exactly the opposite, right? I think people who are creative can use these tools in very, very effective ways and actually, augment creativity as we sort of have spoken about. Okay, so let me just spend a few minutes along with Lokesh to speak about the method of trisociation. So one of the famous quotes when it talks to ideas is that there's nothing new under the sun, right? So almost anything that we talk about, we talk about, it being there around in some form or the other, many years ago. So the method of trissociation we talked about in the article is actually a fairly old technique, but for some reason it's not been used. So if you ask even people who are experts on creativity, most people are not aware of this particular technique. So we talk about this in our article, and this article, of course, the sheer amount of interest in this article, it was mind-blowing even to us, and it was published in 7 actually global editions. And it was interesting because this article, it was extremely hard to translate, right? Because many of the prompts were in English, and many of these languages don't really have the same kind of support. But the topic was so interesting, and that all these editors, they wanted to have it, and not just as a translated article, but as a cover article in many of these languages. And one of the things that we talked about is this method called trissociation. So trissociation is a technique which I'm sure very few people had heard of, right? And the only sort of major reference that you could see in any kind of design or creativity book was in the classic Design for the Real World by the famous designer Victor Papanek. And Papanek spends like 2 or 3 pages talking about this technique called bisociation, which is a well-known technique that we use in organizations to come up with ideas, which is really taking two concepts together and blending it into something creative. Now, and then Papanek spends like half a paragraph on talking about, well, you could extend this to trissociation, which is 3 sort of topics together, 3 teams together, and bring it into an interesting concept. But it's really never been applied in organizations. People have never tried it out, and the main reason is it's extremely hard, right? So if I asked you to take, and I'm going to do this as an exercise that you could try, as we speak, is that the moment I ask you to sort of connect 2 concepts, right? It's not a very challenging task. Most of us can do it. But the moment I extend that to 3 concepts, it becomes extremely challenging, right? Most people would find it hard to come up with an idea that blends 2 concepts, particularly concepts which are unrelated to each other. But I think this is important because there are 2 reasons. Because a lot of the ideas that are really innovative, right, it combines both novelty and feasibility. And in many cases, if you analyze those ideas, you'll see that it sort of blends more than 2 concepts. Okay, I'm not necessarily saying it's 3 concepts, but it involves a combination of more than 2 concepts. So essentially, if you want to get good ideas that are both novel and workable, it has to integrate multiple concepts, and trissociation a way of sort of trying to achieve that. And I think this is generally hard for human ideators. Now that's where generative AI comes in. Now, another advantage of trissociation is that there are a lot more jump-off points. Now, what do I mean by jump-off points? So let's say that you're thinking about having a game in your organization where you're sort of encouraging people to come up with weird ideas or wild ideas, right? And you're starting off with, say, 20 concepts, right? And you're sort of giving everybody 2 cards and saying, okay, blend these 2 concepts into something innovative. Now that's the traditional approach called bisociation, right? But what we see is that, let's say you have a set of like end concepts, right? And you ask people to come up with sort of unique combinations. What we see is that as the number of concepts increase, the potential for unique starting points, right, or unique vantage points for ideas, it's much higher when you choose 3 random objects, right? So essentially, what we're saying is that the amount of scope for coming up with novel combinations is much higher when we try to combine 3 concepts than compared to 2 concepts. Now, again, it's fairly hard for human ideators to do, right? It's not impossible, but it's hard. But that's where sort of generative AI comes into play, right? So so this is the illustration we give in the article. We say, okay, so there's this 3 concepts. Okay, these are not necessarily very disparate or very sort of different concepts, but they're related. But even in these kind of question, if I quickly asked you, can you come up with an idea that combines virtual reality, sustainable agriculture, and personalized nutrition? Most of you would find it somewhat challenging, right? But instead, if I just picked up 2 of these, right, it would be much easier. Now, instead, if I now pass it on, if I ask, ChatGPT, right, and this is 3.5, which was the version at that time, it gives a fairly interesting and fairly workable idea, right? And like I pointed out, in most of these cases, it's not about taking these ideas and implementing it, right? It's about using this as the stepping stone to build something that's both novel and workable, right? Very rarely do you get, right, from all the experiences we've had in 1 year working with organizations and try this out. We said very rarely does ChatGPT or AI throw out something that is immediately useful, right? It's more something that helps you go to the next stage of thinking, whether it's improving the novelty of the idea or improving the feasibility of the idea, right? So I'm going to have a quick exercise. I know I'm already slightly ahead of time. So here's just a list of random concepts generated by ChatGPT, and I just picked up 3, right? Umbrella, tree, and car, right? Now, to the audience, like if you can just take a minute to take these 3 concepts, right? Umbrella, tree, and car, and try to come up with a novel idea or a novel business concept that integrates these 3 ideas. Okay, so I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds to think through, and so that you could just think about this. So essentially what I would like you to do is take these 3 concepts, try to blend these things together, right, into a product or a business idea. Okay, I guess that's the 30 seconds. So can I have a quick show of hands as, how many of you, so if you can just, give me a, thumbs up or a hand raised on Zoom, how many of you were able to come up with what you think is an interesting idea, just in that 30 seconds that combined all the 3 concepts? I'm hoping for at least a few. I don't see any.
Oh, Jim, there's one in the Q&A from
Okay.
Philip. He says mobile parasol.
Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, so we have some responses. That's great. Okay, so some of you are able to do this, but yeah, it looks like most of you find it challenging, right? But
There's a few more too. There's a few more if you're interested. I guess the chat is disabled, so that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Someone said
Not
candle with rainbow colors and coffee scent. Someone said a car accessory, umbrella on top of the car, and a tree to protect it when it rains.
Awesome. So there are lots of people who are extremely creative in the audience. Anyway, so the idea here is that, so what I did is I passed it on to ChatGPT, and it came up with an idea which I thought was interesting, right? And it was able to do this fairly quickly, right? And so of course, again, the key point here is that it's not that this idea is workable. And I similar to what Dan did, I picked this idea and passed it on to a text-to-image model and sort of created a sort of illustration of that particular concept. But the idea here is that you have these 3 sort of unconnected concepts, right? And you're still being able to blend it together into something that's interesting and potentially marketable, right? And you could try this, and I think this is a great creativity exercise, right? So you could actually have are you smarter than AI, or are you more creative than AI kind of a game where you're playing against ChatGPT and having people judge whether your idea is actually better than the one that ChatGPT comes up with. So that's something you could try at home. But again, here's another one with candle, camera, and clock, and I struggled to come up with an idea here, and lo and behold, ChatGPT didn't have any difficulty doing this. But now, once I saw this initial idea, now that gave me something which I felt I could take this into something a lot more marketable, right? Something that a lot more promising in terms of business value. Okay, so for most people, so this is fairly trivial, right? So having three random concepts, but where I think it gets interesting and I think useful for organization is when what we call a tri-association with 2 degrees of freedom or tri-association with 1 degree of freedom, where you start off with a fixed concept, right? So here, let's say you're an organization and you're looking for something interesting to challenge your notion of how your product or your business idea should look like. So essentially, you're not going to change your business model, right? So if you're making cars, you're not going to suddenly switch to making umbrellas, right? Or hopefully not. So in this particular case, so you're starting with a product that you already have, so that could be a concept, but then trying to sort of identify 2 random concepts, somewhat divergent, different from what you're, sort of connected to the concept of a car, and then using it in the same way to come up with innovative models, right? So here in this case, I assume that, I was working for a company that made air conditioning systems, and then I sort of, chose 2 random concepts, and it gave an idea, again, not a very workable idea, but it gives me something to think about, right? Something that I can use to build up into something more interesting, right? And I could extend this where I have 2 fixed concepts. Let's say I have a shoe company, and I'm thinking of making interesting and novel shoes for let's say college athletes, right? So I have 2 concepts here, right? College athletics and shoes, but then I can use a third concept, right, to sort of create the novelty element, right, to sort of force me to think in a novel way. So in this particular case, I put sports and shoe as the fixed concept, and umbrella as the unrelated concept. So it gave me an idea, for example, an umbrella on top of a shoe, stop it from raining. Clearly a ridiculous idea, but of course, but then it set me to think. I started thinking, okay, there's a genuine problem here, right? So shoes get wet, right? So can we have a kind of system which may not be an umbrella, but something that solves this problem in a way that an umbrella solves it, right? By having a new layer on top of the existing product, right? So essentially, it's not about the idea per se, but it's about how that it actually helps you to think in taking an idea forward. Okay, so there's some work that sort of I put up on this link that gives you some examples on how you can use tri-association to do all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested, take a look. But I think this is an interesting concept. So if you're in the process of early product development, coming up with novel ideas, so please take a look at the this is something that I think you could try, and hopefully you'll see some interesting results. So Lokesh, would you like to add to that?
You're on mute, Lokesh.
Yeah, I'm back here. So, I started my career as a designer actually. So trying out multiple the models using PUF models and all. I know how much hard it is, how much time consuming to really prove showcase the products actually. So when we really they use this bio-association or tri-association, I mean to say the first level of proving the concepts actually drastically brings down the cycle time. Actually, what Dan has already mentioned, I could see just to show the concept, first level of concept, we used to spend weeks and months together because we need to really showcase as a model actually. So the later, in the computer, the CAD systems were able to really showcase to some extent actually much faster. And now I think the way the discussion happens actually with the ChatGPT, I mean to say the number of concepts which you can showcase, definitely it will really multiplies and amplifies it actually. If you really look at historically, and what we have seen, the pillars used to have a sculpture which is having 3 animals sculptured in single pillar, actually possibly an elephant face with a crocodile teeth, and then the body with a horse, and then the tail. That is considered to be one of the highest level of creativity actually historically. I think when you really look at those level of competency can be built in each one of us, that is what actually, like, which really amazes actually, because that is what the underlining aspect of the ChatGPT, wherein which brings the prioritization, and then the way you think, it amplifies actually. So you can really, like, see immediately, and then, like, you can really I mean to say, like, it enhances the creative aspect of you don't need to get trained actually to really see those concepts. So I think that is what I feel like, the utilization of these tools can really enhance each and every one in the organization.
Thanks, Lokesh. Yeah, and thank you, Tojin. I think, one thing that you said that stood out for me that I think is a misconception for many when it comes to these types of tools is they are not silver bullets, right? Like, rarely are you producing something on the first try that you're going to go use. No, but it's all about sort of inspiring, new ways of thinking, and, which typically leads to breakthrough ideas and improvements. All right, so by the way, I would say like 90% of the attendees that were on at the beginning are still here. So we haven't, I haven't completely, made them bored or anything. So we're doing something right, guys. We are kind of coming up towards the end of our time for today. We have about 6 more minutes. We're going to go ahead and take some questions. So if you do have one, pop it into that Q&A, chat. In the meantime, I'm going to leave this up. If you are interested in having further discussion with either one of us, we kind of all have our respective, areas of expertise. This QR code should take you to our LinkedIn. I hope. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. Just go ahead and search for us on LinkedIn, but you can take out your phone and hopefully that will take you right to our LinkedIn page. Go ahead and connect with us there. And, like I said, if you want to have a chat, some kind of a private chat about Gen AI and at your company and innovation, happy to do that. We love doing that. So, all right. So if it's okay with you guys, let's hop into some of the Q&A here for the next 5 minutes, and we can get through as many as we can. Let's see. And again, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I think there's like 34 ideas. So, I'm going to just try and pluck out a few here. Okay. So Kevin is asking about using Gen AI design thinking. Has anyone used, Gen AI design thinking? If so, what were some of the highlights? Dan, this sounds like a question you might be able to respond to.
Yeah, so I haven't specifically followed the format of design thinking necessarily. I have used it to recreate the lean startup method, which is another Stanford method. But if you look at these, and this is not a knock against any of the developers, they're very highly correlated. They're very similar, right? So there's this early stage, ideation, customer exploration. You sort of build a prototype, you test it, you take what you learn, you validate that learning, and you build that into your next iteration of what lean startup would consider the minimal viable product. And that minimal viable product goes from paper conception to maybe a workable prototype, or is something as simple as a wire diagram, or maybe it's actually a workable app. I will say, I've had some really interesting stuff on these where I've had business students who had zero coding capability, zero. And the idea they came up with was an initial website or app that was an interactive system, right? That was basically, it was monitoring software risk, right? So something that they didn't have a deep background in at all. And they kept trying to get computer science students to help them build a prototype, and they couldn't get them to do it. So within a day, actually it was half a day, they went from not even having any Python or anything even on their computers to having GPT show them how to download it, how to use it, and they had coded a workable prototype by the end of the day, right? And they were showing that to the sponsor. And then the sponsor, it just clicked, which was like, oh, yeah, this is what we need, right? They kept drawing pictures, they kept passing sticky notes, and they were kind of getting it. But then when the students did a video of them actually using a workable app, the sponsor was like, yes, that's what I want, right? And so it was just remarkable how it can get through that design thinking process. Again, we use Lean Startup, very, very similar. and get you to a workable prototype within a very short period. Because let's be honest, nowadays, many prototypes are software based. And that is another barrier, right? Which is if you're not, that's why you see so many things going to a low code solution, now no code, low code, maybe doesn't matter as much because I can just get the AI to code it, right? And I can start iterating with it, right? And so it's pretty impressive,
Here's actually another one for you, Dan, because I think you're probably in these conversations more so than I am, at least. There's some questions about privacy, right? And I think still people are, interested in using these tools, but still learning about them. So one question is kind of about, text and images. How do you know that they're not being used by someone else? Can the AI reveal its sources? And there's also questions about privacy when putting this stuff into ChatGPT or DALL-E. So how do you typically address those questions when you're in those conversations?
Yeah, it's a large set of things to discuss, right? If you're talking about intellectual property, at least on the US side, I mean, the executive order that just came out gave the patent office like 270 days to like figure it out, basically. So that tells you where we're at on it, right? Which is they just told them like, hey, you got 270 days, go figure this out. So the IP has not been solved. Now, when it comes to text to image, there's differences in how those models work. So some generate literally at the pixel level. So, they're grabbing just, millions and billions of resource data at the pixel level. So it's not actually grasping a full image of like, Tojin's face and regenerating it, right? Others do generate at the image level, or at least larger chunks of the image than the pixel level, right? So those would be something you might be more concerned about. Hey, that's not an original image that's coming out of it. What I have seen, like with products like Midjourney, is giving it a request to generate a concept design or a product design typically generates a unique image. But if you say do it in the style of XYZ, it will go grab multiple images from that source, and it is highly likely it will be reusing someone else's design or something like that. So, if you're a big fan of Mercedes-Benz, you're like, design a train in the style of a Mercedes-Benz car, it's going to grab a lot of design features from Mercedes-Benz, right? If you say design a train in the in the form of a falcon or something like that, it's going to use that in the iteration. And so you should only see sort of overlap with someone else who's used a similar design, but it won't be a one-for-one, if that makes sense. Now, in terms of like putting your text, your images in and what you get out, and is that protected? A ChatGPT model, they're going to say, we take your inputs and your outputs for future training, right? So I can't go search for like, what did Tojin put in last week, right? It's not a search function, right? I'd have to like, Tojin would have to be using the same prompts and same information millions of times. And then I would have to go in and ask for something very similar to get exactly what Tojin's doing, right? So that's a little bit less risky than like, you're probably actually honestly more risky using a cloud storage system than you are using GPT, because someone could actually go get your files. So just keep that in mind. It's a risk, sure. Is it as direct a risk as literally cloud storage of your files? Now the difference is I don't know that as much time has been spent on cybersecurity or security as has been with cloud. So that's the other side, right? Cloud is probably more of an upfront direct risk, but it's one that's been highly mitigated. AI is more of an unknown risk that has had less mitigation built into it. So it's a moving target, but there are models out there like Llama 2 that you could just download to your own hardware, and then you don't have to worry about it. But you do have to realize when we're talking about creativity and generation, if you segregate your model from the world of learning, that model will eventually become less and less novel and unique because it will only have the use cases that you have within the model. Does that make sense, right? It's not learning as it goes. And you worry about things like model drift, which is the idea that as the world changes, your inputs and the outputs no longer reflect what the world is seeing. So that's the trade-off, I guess.
Sounds good. We actually still have over half of the people that were, again, here at the beginning, still here. I know that we're at time, but I'm happy to stay on a few more minutes to get through some of these questions. Tojin, Lokesh, Dan, if you can stay on, that would be wonderful too. We can go for maybe 5 more minutes, if that sounds okay to you. Okay. This next question, Tojin, I think is a good one for you. Thomas is asking, does it need to start with a problem statement / identification? Let's see. of a problem, or I think in search of a solution, or can it help discover an opportunity? I think that was asked in reference to one of your presentation.
Okay, so I think both. I think if you go back to the article, I think one of the powerful ideas which I felt was conveyed was how it sort of challenged your biases, right? And I think in both these situations, I think it can do that, right? So essentially, if you have a problem statement, right? So there's a tendency to think in a certain way, right? And sort of directly go at the easiest way or the most direct way of approaching it. In many cases, that might be a product that a competitor has. So I think you could, and the hope is that using some of these techniques, you're getting ideas which you normally would not get, right, in the regular process of ideation. So if you're getting the same thing, well, it's not useful. The same thing with this opportunities, right? So in the case of opportunities, I think again Dan could sort of add this. You need a little more data, right? Because the large language model is essentially trained on historical data. So whereas opportunities, you're essentially you're interested in something that's emerging, something that's new, and to some extent it can capture that. But it's also helpful maybe to have some form of new inputs, right? So you could maybe list down 20 things that are happening in your industry, right? And say how you could interpret that in the context of a product that you're making. At the same time, keep in mind that you don't want to be extremely directive. You don't want to sort of solve, sort of state the kind of output that you want, but at the same time, give something that would give an opportunity to give something surprising, something that would challenge the way that you think.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's a lot of questions kind of about, will this session be available after the fact via recording? Yes, absolutely. We'll be sharing that with anyone that registered for the event, I believe tomorrow, with the YouTube link. So then you can use that link to share it with anyone else you want inside of your organization. Let's see. I think that's kind of where we should wrap it up, kind of given where we are with our time today. Let's see. Yeah, just some good comments in there. So, I was gonna say, people are also asking for a list of tools that we're using or that we have used. So if there's someone here, part of the IdeaScale team, we can think about that as a blog post or something to follow up with attendees on. And then, Tojin, Dan, maybe Lokesh, that's something to think about maybe on LinkedIn if you wanted to publish something. People are also asking kind of about how you add Dolly to the ChatGPT for, so I think there could be an opportunity to help some folks there. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you again. Thank you to everyone that attended today. Really appreciate your time. And again, thank you to the panelists who I've just had such a great honor of working with, now for over a year on this, almost over a year, and looking forward to more of this for sure. And thank you so much for your time. On behalf of IdeaScale, we appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, all.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, take care, and look for the recording in your email tomorrow. Thank you again.